instant integrations, but somehow it's not.
Yeah, you thought Instagram. You thought Instagram was probably one of the key ones.
Right? No, it's actually seems to be LinkedIn and YouTube, which I'm happy with, but Instagram is also okay. It's working, but I would have no idea how to invite you there now. Should I try?
On Instagram?
Yeah.
Potentially.
Let me
I don't
see.
actually have Instagram. Would I need it on my PC? Because I don't actually have Instagram on this computer.
I have no idea. You know what? Never mind. I'll just tag you afterwards.
Yeah, where is?
When I open my app, I do not
Yeah.
appreciate what I can do. So let's just go with that. All right. I see people are rolling in, so I'm just gonna do a quick opener. Sorry, guys, we're a few minutes late. As usual, I'm struggling with the tech. And that's probably not the biggest struggle that most of the founders have. They usually struggling with decisions. It's not the lack of courage, it's the lack of a system, really. And today we're here to help you fix that. So today's topic is how to make the tough founder calls nobody prepares you for. And those calls could be like necessary to make when you're missing the data, your runway is shrinking, the signal is noisy, you don't even know what's noisy, what's signal anymore, and every choice feels like it could be the last one. So we're going to break down a practical system for high stakes decisions, forcing functions, revenue model ceilings, decision triage, and the mental models that tell you whether to stop, pivot, or double down. It's nothing inspirational, it's just pure decision architecture. And here with me today, I have Tom Cullen, who is the founder of Zoplo, a Gen Z social polling app that grew to 80,000 users across 170 countries, right,
Yeah.
Tom? Without spending a single dime on marketing. And I actually had Tom on my podcast earlier this year, I think almost at the beginning of the year. And what stood out from that interview was two things. His extreme risk tolerance. Basically, he said something like, if I won't die, so I might as well just go and do it. And I love that mindset. And the second thing was his honesty about shutting down his previous startup because he waited too long to confront the system level constraints, which makes him the perfect person to dissect how founders actually make tough calls. Tom, do you want to add anything to the intro?
No, thank you very much for that great intro. Nothing to add there, but yeah, I'm excited to talk through some of the real applications of how I actually made decisions, both before Zoplo, during Zoplo, and then after it. As a founder, when you grow and scale your company, the most important thing you can do is have a good decision-making framework, because at least if things don't go right, you can look back and say, well, actually, I would have made those same decisions because they're based on some logical way of thinking. So yeah, very excited to get into it.
All right. So let's start with the forcing functions. When you reach the moment, how you quoted it to me, we could not make the commercials work before the runway ran out. What was the real forcing function? Like not the narrative, but the actual constraints in the system.
Yeah. So just to kind of preface that with some context. So as you rightly mentioned, so we grew Zoplo to the largest Gen Z social polling app. My previous background was in investment banking. I then got 40 million views on TikTok, built an organic acquisition strategy that got us, 80,000 users, 170 countries. But we also had a ridiculous amount of engagement on the app. So it was doing really well from that point of view. But of course, we were building consumer app, and where the commercial model can be quite hard to make work in the short term because most of them rely on scale. Okay, so if you're making money from your users themselves, it's all about scale. So we built the company, raised VC funding, and we realized actually initially we were just pitching it on the consumer angle, and we realized actually, given the state of the funding market, you get pre-seed funds asking for six figures in revenue. So we knew actually we need to commercialize. We started doing that. By the time we found where that would work, it was just too late. And, it doesn't feel like it when you're building. You feel like you have perpetuity to figure things out. But I experienced firsthand, you don't have perpetuity, and you can have an extremely great product. Unfortunately, there's, your burn rate is extremely important, as is particularly low by construct, but you still have a burn rate. And you have a point at which actually you need to make a call and you need to make a decision. There were parts in the journey where I probably at the time felt like it was going to come to an end, and I managed to make it work and decide to persevere. But we got to 3 years in, and actually it got to a point where I decided the better future for Zoplo was to find a strategic buyer who already had the commercial channels in place and could take Zoplo forward, rather than me, who was essentially starting from scratch. So that was how we ended it. I took a new role as a head of growth and sales at another startup, a really promising construction technology startup. And we then started a process for looking for a strategic buyer. And we're currently still in that process. So we're currently speaking with, obviously I can't name names, but we're currently speaking with a company, and we're at the very final stages of getting that over the line.
Gotcha. I think there is this service called acquire.com where you can actually list the startup.
Yes, I'm familiar with acquired.com. For us, it was about making sure we found the right home for Zoplo. And again, I hopefully, in the not too distant future, I could come back on and talk through that decision in a lot of nuance. But the company we're working with, we think are a great fit. And it was important for us that it was a good fit, and that it fits with our existing business model, and they can take it to that next level.
Right, because at the end of the day, it's not just something that you want to just kind of, put in the closet and forget about it. It's something that you've devoted quite a chunk of your life to.
Yeah, we solved some amazing problems. We solved, so some of the problems we solved were we didn't pay our users to vote in polls, and when you don't pay your users, you have no survey fraud, or you can never say you don't have survey fraud.
Right.
That's impossible, but you have no real incentive for survey fraud. So one of the biggest issues in market research is A, people will just game surveys to get paid, and B, no one really cares and is engaged. We solve both those problems for short surveys for Gen Z. The issue with a lot of these things is when you're coming onto the market, you can't just commercialize it as much as, YC, the YC kind of mantra is you want to sign that big enterprise client quickly. Just real world doesn't work like that. And unless you have some champions who can make that happen,
Right.
Things take time. And at the point we realized we'd solved those problems and we had a great solution, and we just ran out of money. And you can't run a business and try provide, you can't scale it and build out the tech and build solutions for customers when you don't have the resources. So yeah.
That actually perfectly leads me to my next question, because you said yourself, it was too late to commercialize it. So how do you, because a lot of founders that I work with, they usually confuse like metrics with structural ceilings, like noisy metrics versus structural ceilings. What is too late? Like, give us the parameters.
So too late for me was ultimately, so it comes more on a personal level. So essentially, there's an opportunity cost with everything you do. Okay, so every bit of time you allocate to something, there's an opportunity cost on that time. It came to a point where we'd run out of money, and I'd already been in the 3 years we did Zoplo. As I mentioned before, I put all the money into building the tech and building the business out, put a lot of my own money in, all our investor money I put into the business. I took a very small salary for 7 months out of about 3 years. I'd already stopped taking a salary to extend our runway as much as possible. But it came to a point where, like, you just can't do that in perpetuity. Ultimately, I'd made a lot of sacrifices, got to a stage, got all that engagement, proven out a few things. And if it isn't clicking at that point, that is the time where you have to logically assess and say, okay, I could do this for 10 years. And yeah, of course, it will be successful over 10 years, but you have to weigh up the opportunity cost. And for me, do I want to essentially be homeless and etc.? I've already done that. It was a point where actually you need to make a decision on there's clearly, for whatever reason, and there's probably loads of them, but it just hasn't quite, it hasn't quite worked. And instead of going and trying to make that slog, find a strategic buyer, find a company that has those channels to commercialize it and can make it work. And actually, that is the best route forward. So we came to a decision of actually me trying to slog away without a resource just isn't going to get it to the right place. We need a company to come in and be that strategic buyer and take it forward, which is what we decided to do.
Because I think in a way, this is where, this is basically like the best win-win you can get, because the product survives and you survive as well. Because otherwise, there is probably like 5 other scenarios that you can do in here, but I think in most of them, it's either the product or you take a massive hit, really.
Yeah, exactly. And, when you build these things as a founder, you're not, they're kind of like your children, right? And I would rather go watch my child survive
Right.
and being taken forward by the right people than just actually decide, hey, we're going to let this die because we don't, we can't get the resources quick enough, basically. So yeah, a difficult decision, but the right decision.
When you were starting to work on the app, were you giving yourself a certain timeline, or was it more so as long as it takes?
No, so I didn't give myself a timeline. I think timelines are arbitrary. And when you decide a timeline, you're deciding it on today's information. That information is incomplete and you need to allow things to be very dynamic. I think a lot of the time things and people do make things work over time. But a lot of the time what you'll find with founders is they will find the magic just in that time. And maybe it isn't the thing they started with day one, but they'll eventually find it because they'll find a problem. You're constantly,
Right.
as a founder, you're constantly looking for problems. So I didn't give myself a timeline. I gave myself what I always said was, I have my underlying thesis. What is my one belief? And at the time that is proven wrong, I will stop. Or the universe decides I have to stop for whatever reason. I could drop dead tomorrow and then it stops. But throughout the entirety of Zoplo, there was one metric, and it was, do people come and vote in a lot of polls, and they do it for free because they enjoy voting in polls? If the data says yes to this, then we continue. If the data ever says no, and actually that first hypothesis is incorrect, we stop. Or we look for alternatives, we pivot. We were always right with that. The data was always in our favor with that. What the data wasn't in our favor with is actually you can build a commercial model down the line when you've got we were wrong on that. Actually, we could keep growing forever without putting money behind it. I thought, we'd just be able to make better and better and better growth channels. We kind of realized after a certain time that becomes harder and harder to do. You need to put cash into it. And the second thing we realized was you basically can't, the old model of, hey, I'm going to raise for Series A to build this consumer app and then commercialize, just doesn't, very, very, very hard to do that. And the only way you can do that is by having crazy growth numbers, which we did have in the beginning, but then because we had started the organic strategy and we dedicate our resource to the tech, you're very hard to then just keep pushing that. Yeah, without our tech suffering, so it is very difficult.
So would it be valid to say that it's then right off the bat better to follow the whole end of day brain is doing farts. Is it better to then more so focus on follow the money strategy, as in just right off the bat find something that people would pay for and then try to structure the whole thing around it? Because it seems like you guys were doing the opposite. You're actually doing something really cool, like the people were doing it, etc. But at the back of it, you weren't thinking of how to actually make money of the whole thing.
Yeah, so we knew how we would make money. The problem we had was that you need scale. The way we wanted to commercialize it, it was quantitative. We needed scale. And we knew, like, at scale, what we had and even what we did have was like so powerful. tens of thousands of Gen Z giving you their opinion in real time, and you're not having to pay for that. And they're voting in hundreds of polls, thousands of polls, and you're getting this complete data set of demographic behavior, intent. I've never come across another company that has managed to do that without having to throw money at surveys.
Right.
I could poke 100 holes in. But the follow the money strategy. So I think the issue is, so there's a great quote by Henry Ford, which is, if you ask the people what they want, they'll tell you faster horses. And that is a quote around the introduction of the automobile. And I think it was a 5-year time span of the automobile being created and introduced versus horses completely got changed to cars. The thing is, people know what they want from a nuanced, I want a workflow to work like this, and I want this problem to be solved. People don't, and most of the time can't always tell you what the innovative solution to that's going to be. That is your job as a founder. So build things people want, absolutely. Follow the money. Like, who is going to give you money to go build that? Because if you're building in a space or for a problem where it's really hard to get financing for, you either have to completely bootstrap it, but know that day one, or if your plan is to build in tech, and now most of tech has needed VC fund, has needed funding because you need to build technology to then go sell it. And it's just the model that's probably changing somewhat. But in terms of a follow the money, you're going to get people who can help guide you and obviously learn people's problems inside and out. But they're probably never going to tell you what the innovative solution to that is going to be. Some people might. You might meet someone who's great and they're just not going to do it, but they have this idea. That is the best case scenario. And I've worked with customers. We work with customers now at Call Loops that are almost like that. They help guide our vision. But realistically, we're thinking, what does the future look like? How do we solve that problem in the most efficient way possible? And what is being funded? Because if, as I mentioned, if something is being funded, it's going to be harder to execute and build it.
I think that also reminds me of another famous quote by Steve Jobs. It's like, get so close to the customers that you get to tell them what they want. I think I butchered it a little bit, but it was essentially something like this.
I do think, especially in consumer, it's, and we do this with Zoplo, like, you have to be really, like, you have to know why something is inherently better. Like take the QWERTY keyboard, for example. Every single keyboard people uses is not the optimal keyboard, okay? But it's been the one that has been widely distributed. And now people are used to it and are familiar with it. But no one has sat there, no consumer has sat there objectively and looked at what the best solution for a keyboard is, because it isn't a QWERTY keyboard. But that's one that's distributed, and people were told this is an optimal keyboard at the time.
Right. This also reminds me, I don't think it's an actual quote, but it's just maybe like a statement. It's like, if you want to sell something new, it has to be familiar but different. It's like, you cannot just like invent a completely new thing and hope for the best, because if it's not familiar, then you're dealing with the whole consumer education thing, and for that you need to be like a super big enterprise and have really deep marketing pockets.
And a lot of the time the first is not the one that lasts. Like the real innovative people and companies of the world, like, there obviously are some exceptions, but they're never quite as an exception as you always think they are. Like the whole iPhone, the premise of a touchscreen phone like existed. It wasn't a completely known and ever thought of.
Right.
And like pretty much everything comes from stepwise innovation and iterating. It's rarely a vacuum, but it's just when we look back in history, we have a survivorship bias. We forget what came before, and we just look at the winners and we think, okay, it went from my Nokia to an iPhone. Well, actually, it didn't. There was a lot in between, and loads of phones and companies that have come and gone. But we only look back, and history rewards the winners.
Oh, that's for sure. So when it comes to, I don't want to say like only important decisions, let's call them like mid-level important to high-level important. What would be the I guess components of decision making, like risk, impact, reversibility, etc.? Like, what are the main things that you can take into consideration when you're making, let's call it strategic decision? Here we go.
Yeah, so when you're making a strategic decision, so I think the key thing here is knowing when to use what framework. So it's selecting, how do I think about a problem and how do I think about a decision? Like, knowing how you think about something is extremely important. Instead of blindly saying, I'm just going to think about everything through this lens, assessing and say, how should I think about this? And there's four I typically use, and we'll kind of go through them. So the first, which is the best one, and I think can apply to a lot of different parts of your life, personal, financial, your career, is essentially, and even friendships, is essentially think about what you want your ideal character to be, like the person you want to be, and then ask yourself, would they make that decision? Like, what decision would they make? Instead of thinking, what would I make right now as Tom Cullen? I think this is the ideal person I would want to be. What decision would they make? And instead of making a decision based on logic, because sometimes logic is imperfect information, so you can't quite compare two things. And when you can't do that, so when there's a lot of unknowns and you can't compare two things because you don't know the outcomes, you have imperfect information, make a decision based on character. So I will always say this, ask myself this question, do I want to be a person that does X, or do I want to be a person that does Y? And usually that just answers my decision. And here's a great example for you. When we were building Zoppler early on, really early on in the journey, even before we'd had all the amazing growth, somebody asked, well, why don't you just put paid surveys into the app? And it all came down to, well, do I want to be somebody that goes for probably the safe bet of, yeah, you can make a little bit of money from it, but you're probably never going to be a unicorn? Or do I want to be the person that takes some risk and goes for it all, and goes for actually going on the consumer social side, the original vision, and we're going to scale it and grow our user base? Now you could look back on that and say, you could maybe put an argument of, was it the wrong decision? I'm not quite sure you could ever answer that question, but actually it was a decision based on character, and I wanted my character to be, I want to be someone who goes big, and I'm going to go big. And it just made that decision far easier because, I wasn't going to play it safe. I was going to take a risk and go big. So that's the first one, making a decision based on character. The second, where there is really tangible outcomes and it's easy to measure, is a risk versus reward framework. So my background was on the trading floor. You're constantly thinking about risk versus reward, okay? When I make a particular trade, what's my upside versus my downside? It's just a way of thinking embedded into you. And here you look at, okay, well, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? What's the likely scenario? And what does that risk reward look like? If there's loads of risk, and this is why we talk about market sizing when we talk about startups. Hey, if I invest £1 million and it's a £3 million market, there's 3x upside there. I mean, the math isn't quite like that, but just for simplification, versus the downside of $1 million, it probably doesn't make sense. Whereas, Bitcoin, fantastic example. Yeah, you could invest £10,000 and the downside's probably zero. The upside could be in the millions, maybe even more, possibly, way higher than that. And now I'm not advocating crypto, but the risk versus reward is clearly skewed to the reward. So actually, from that point of view, hey, if I size this accordingly, it probably makes sense to make a decision for action because the reward's so high. So that's the second. And then the third is a regret minimization framework. So you think about how do I minimize the regret with this decision? This is a really, really common one with, I think, career. People will often think about career and will take in loads of factors. I think what you want to really think about, and so, a really easy one is, should I go traveling? Should I quit your job won't give you a sabbatical? Should I go traveling? Well, the answer to that is probably yes, because your regret of not going traveling will far outweigh your regret of quitting your job and maybe having to apply and spend a bit of time applying for a new one. You maybe regret having to put those hours in, but in the grand scheme of your life, you're going to regret not quitting and spending those months traveling. And then the last one is I don't know if there's a phrase for this one, but it's basically about removing emotions from decisions. Some decisions do need emotion in, like we're not robots, we're not AI just yet. But sometimes decision making framework, I think how do I remove all the emotion? And once I've removed all the emotion, what is the answer? This is often, and here's, I know we're not talking about relationship therapy here, but here's a really good one. When you're upset with your partner, and remove all that upset, and what is the like an objective third person perspective, what decision would they make? And when you remove your emotions and you take that almost objective view, what would you decide to do? So there are a couple of ways I think about how to make strategic decisions, and based on the situation, I'll tend to use one or more of those frameworks.
Sorry, I was just clicking through all of the channels to see if everything is working. Sorry, guys, I feel like LinkedIn is not working. And oh my God, Riverside is going to take it from me again this week. No, this is super frustrating. Sorry for this deviation. And now it also killed my follow-up question. So I was...
Should we talk about decision-making frameworks people could use?
So how do you... I think this is the biggest confusion that everybody has, which is the separation between a good outcome and good decision-making process.
Yeah.
Like, how do you separate the two?
Yeah. So a good outcome is, does it align with your objectives? Like, a good outcome is it, if you think in a business point of view, you have certain objectives, certain North Star metrics. Does this outcome align with those, and how closely does it align? For example, like, is the outcome I get 20,000 users to my app? Then yes, that's a good outcome because it's aligned with my objective of getting more downloads. But decision is like, a decision's more nuanced than that. It isn't just, does it align with my objectives? Does it repeatedly allow me to operate in a certain way? Like, your decision might not always get you the perfect outcome, but like,
right.
My really, really easy example for this is, you're a founder, you're looking to raise, hypothetically, this has never happened. You're a founder looking to raise funding. An old man drops a briefcase. You go pick the briefcase up, and £200,000 comes out of a briefcase. Now, do you take that briefcase and go fund your company, which will get you the outcome you want, or do you go give that briefcase back? Now, the decision-making framework should always tell you go give that back,
right.
Which isn't going to get you the outcome, but it's the right decision every single time. Every time you look back on that, because over time, that is a good character, and that will get you far in life, having good character and being good to other people. So yeah, whilst outcomes align with objectives, decisions are more about, can you do something repeatedly to get you the best outcomes over a longer period of time?
You also talked about opportunity cost. Is there such a thing as consequence cost? Because I think this is very much attached to the example that you just gave, because we all know what the consequence could be in this case. Like, you could end up in jail, whatever. It's highly hypothetical scenario, but still.
100%. There's consequences to everything you do in life. And we like to paint narratives that life is just magical and everything will work out. That's just not true. It is just, unfortunately, I hate to be pessimistic, but it isn't true. Things aren't guaranteed to work out for you. Now, if you have a mindset of you're going to be happy and grateful for life and enjoy life, or that nothing actually matters in the grand scheme of things, then it's all irrelevant anyway. But it isn't a Hollywood movie. Like, not everything will work out for you.
Right.
And not everything, everything always, the common phrase, everything will work out for the best in the end. Again, it's just not true. I wish it were, but everyone's life is not going to be optimal. And that's a real side of consequences. Depending on what you do, what business decisions you make, your company can fail. You can maybe not go and make that sale that propels your company to the next level. You may not go hire that person you've been wanting to hire who could be instrumental. There's lots of consequences that can happen, and that not everything is for the best, which I think people just don't want to believe in life. It's easy to believe everything happens for a reason and all that good stuff, but it's just not true.
So would you then say that this whole consequence cost should be attached to your risk tolerance? Like, you should be able to establish this for yourself?
Yeah, 100%. Like the consequences, you should know your consequences, and I think that's sometimes what there's an opportunity cost of, which is can be hard to measure, but people are more aware. But people aren't aware of the consequences, and it can be hard to measure. But the consequences of you, let's say you know having £50,000 in saving and going and putting it all into your company and it not working, that's a consequence. Like that is a consequence, and you should be well aware of what that means. People just like to think about the upside, but I think people should be more aware of consequences for sure.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, at least for me personally, it has always been like the toughest line to draw. Like, how do I not overthink the consequences that could potentially stop me from making the move in the first place?
But I think as well, having just said that, and sometimes I do like to play devil's advocate and give different opinions. You also don't want to overthink them. Like most, what you have to also think is that your judgment's probably not you, but one's judgment is probably quite poor. So if you go on the basis that my estimation of consequences, risk, reward, etc., is quite poor, I'll probably just make better decisions because I know that I probably haven't, like, I don't have all the information to understand that. If, say, for example, like you decide to be 5 minutes late, or here's a better one, okay? You've got an important sales meeting and you decide to move that for whatever reason, there's probably a consequence there. If you're inexperienced in sales, you may not, or you may not realize what that consequence is. If you're experiencing sales, you may have overconfidence in you think you know what that consequence is. You're probably best just assuming that you just have no idea what the consequence of that is going to be. And actually, I probably shouldn't move it because I just can't really ascertain what that consequence is. Because, yeah, even though I'm experienced and maybe customers are fine with moving it, maybe I'm wrong. So I think just knowing how you look at consequence and understanding that you're just probably lack of judgment in that respect just makes you make better decisions.
I have so many more questions for you, Tom, but I think we have to switch to the Q&A because it's we're getting we're on time, but I see questions rolling in and I've been trying to scroll through them. Okay, let's take this one. Tom, what's the earliest leading indicator for you that the business will never scale, even if everything, quote unquote, looks good?
The earliest indicator a business won't scale. So it depends what you. So if we can think about scaling in three ways actually. If we think about scaling from a conceptual point of view, like I speak to loads of people, founders with ideas, and I'm like, it just isn't a scale business. It's like, yes, might solve a problem for a really small subset of people. And the indicator with that is that you just can't, like, even if one person's really, really like bullish that the solution works, if you just can't find enough people that also think that, it probably isn't going to scale conceptually. Like as an idea, it just won't scale. If you find it hard to find those people, for example, here's a great one, right? If you went and said to anyone, I will give you free AI compute, they will bite your hand off. That scales, okay? As an idea, okay, it might not scale. We could get into the nuance of that, but as a concept of providing AI compute, that scales. Everyone wants it. There's clear demand for it. Then there's scaling operationally. This is slightly harder to see early on, but I think I've never come across something not scaling operationally because I'm a pretty systems-driven person. But I've definitely seen companies of where it works because it works in. Okay, maybe here's a great example. Okay, here's where you haven't considered the ecosystem. So I saw a really, really good article. I don't know who did it, but it was about their grandma had set up a meal delivery service in the 80s. I saw it on LinkedIn, read it, thought it was a very good article. Whoever it is, great article. But here's the thing, and like the infrastructure just didn't exist then to make it work. So it just doesn't scale because the infrastructure doesn't exist. So I think sometimes early warning signs are just that infrastructure isn't there. You're finding it really difficult. Everything is manual and is getting more manual. Right. When things get more manual, it probably doesn't scale. And then the third is distribution, which, you know, is my bread and butter, day in, day out, consumer, B2B. Here, when something doesn't scale, is when your channel, like, I think there's always a channel that scales distribution. Very optimistic here. Having seen it personally, built those channels myself, I know things scale. But here, when distribution doesn't scale, is when the cost of distribution is just far greater than actually what you're selling. For example, you know, if we take a look at construction industry, okay, if you're doing anything to, you know, a man in a van, any technology to a man in a van, that's really hard to make scale. And it's hard to make scale because you need to get in front of them for a low cost. But not even just that, you need to change their attitude towards technology. If they're just one person, they probably think, hey, I can manage with other things. So the distribution is not just getting in front of them, but it's also being able to get in front of them and change their mind. And it just doesn't scale because the reward is probably just way smaller than the cost of doing that. So it just doesn't scale. So they're the three ways. I you know, classically the ideas, concepts, and operations don't scale.
I would say from my side, I would add that if the product is more like a nice have versus must have, it's probably not going to scale because you're selling vitamins versus painkillers. We all know which one sells the best.
Yeah. I also just think, like, in a very raw way, like, do people give it, like, without, I'm not going to swear, but do people give an F about it? Like, do people care? Like, are you trying to get people to care, or do they just care? Like, you know, we go back to this example of compute, right? People care
Right.
about that. You can find loads of people who just care and are actively searching for it. On the other hand, you know, a classic one I see all the time are people creating rent-to-rent student marketplaces. So student-to-student rental marketplaces. Just people don't care. Not that many people want to rent stuff. Like, and people say they might care a little bit, but they don't. No one ever goes out of the way to try rent like an iron or something. It just doesn't happen. So that's a good example of when people just don't care.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I have another question. Probably, no, you know what? It's not connected, but I think it's still a really good question. What's a decision that you only realized was wrong maybe 6 months after you made it, and how would you diagnose it earlier now?
Yeah, so I think loads of decisions are made of wrong. Like naturally, anyone in life makes a lot of wrong decisions. I don't think it's about not making the wrong decision. I think, you know, there's a Jeff Bezos describes this really well. Can you go through the door and come back again, or when you go through that door, are you fully through the door? And I think it's more about just knowing what situation you're in and how easy it is to reverse that decision. Make the wrong decision. If you can reverse that decision pretty quickly, like hiring is a great example. Okay, you're going to hire and you're going to hire wrong a lot of the time. What you need to be able to do is go back on that, and now you can always go back on that hiring, right? But make sure you have a setup that allows you to go back on that and to go back on that fairly easily, because you're just going to be wrong a lot of the times. And how do you diagnose you've made the wrong decision? Have clear criteria beforehand of what you want to achieve from that. Hiring, we'll use that as a great example. If I'm going to hire someone as a sales BDR, you're going to want to set like attainable, rough, like you need a picture, an idea, a measurable idea of what success looks like. And then you look at back, okay, was it wrong decision to hire because they couldn't achieve it? Was it the wrong decision to hire them because they haven't achieved it? And you work back and answer those questions. So having the metrics super important, and knowing when you can go back from a decision. But don't be worried about making wrong decisions. We all make wrong decisions.
That's for sure. And I think the person who believes otherwise is either crazy or narcissistic.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. I think I love using quotes. Great quote from Winston Churchill: "Those who never change their mind never change anything." It's just so true. You are allowed to change your mind, and you are allowed to just be like, I'm wrong. And the quicker you get into a habit, like I will tell everyone we work with all the time, like, yeah, I'm more than happy to be wrong. I just change my mind on things instantly. And like, it's people have this weird sense of pride of not doing that. It's like, yeah, if I learn new information and I'm wrong about that, I don't care what I said before. I'm going with the best available information on what I should do based on that. So I don't mind if the decision was wrong before. If we can correct it because there's new information, absolutely, we will do that.
Right. I'm also going to throw in a quote since we're doing quotes today. I cannot remember who said it, but it goes as insanity is doing the same thing over and over and hoping for a different outcome.
Yeah.
It's like literally it could be applied to anything. Like you said, like personal, professional, etc.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I have to choose the last question because we're coming to time and there are so many good of them. I also received a couple beforehand. Okay, let's go for this one. How do I know when my optimism has become a liability to my team?
How do you know when your optimism is a liability to your team?
Mm-hmm.
I think that so okay, we're going to have to make some assumptions here on what you're being optimistic about. I think if you're optimistic without,
Probably about how much time they still have left. It's
yeah,
classic, you know?
yeah, I think if you're being optimistic without contingency plans, you're being a liability. For
Okay.
example, me being optimistic that, hey, we're gonna, uh, I don't deliver product, but if I was building product, hey, we're going to deliver this product by then, okay, and there's a customer dependency on that. If I'm just being optimistic about it and not contingency planning for, okay, well, if we had these blockers and it couldn't be delivered, what would we do with that customer? If I have a plan in place, it's fine. Be as optimistic as you want. But if you're not planning your downside and you're not hedging against your downside risk and contingency planning, then your optimism's always a liability. Assume everything will go wrong until you prove yourself wrong and things go right.
I love that. Again, I think goes back to like not overthinking it, but like just be prepared for the worst case scenario. Basically,
Yeah,
don't overthink it, but have a plan.
exactly. Yeah.
All right. I think we had a really cool discussion here. You mentioned that you speak to a lot of founders on a weekly basis. Do you do something like mentorship, etc.? Like, what should people reach out to you for, and what is the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you can reach out to me about anything. I'll usually chat. You'll usually anyone who speaks to me will get. I will try like respond quite quickly, like in the beginning, and then like time's short. So it will probably go into some mental prioritization of like how much. If you are good, if you are clearly doing things quickly and moving forward and good, I will invest a lot of time in you. But like a lot of people reach out, and there's only so many hours in the day. So
Right.
my advice would be reach out. I will help with obviously if you're interested in distribution, but you need to show that you're making progress. Otherwise, it becomes a waste of my time, because I'm telling you things that you're not ready to action yet. So feel free to reach out about anything, even if you're a super early stage, and I'll give you feedback. I will give you some lessons that I've learned and maybe even share some of my secrets on distribution. But then in return, I want to see you moving quick and progressing. Otherwise, it becomes just a waste of my time. But yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to take just cold outreach. Someone did a really good cold outreach the other day, actually. They emailed me. They actually did. They went to my university and they were in the same society I was in. Just emailed me and said, "Hey, this is the common connection between the two of us. This is me, and this is what I'm interested in. Can you give me some advice?" I was like, "Yes, of course." Great cold email, just to the point. You don't need to pretend you know anything about me. I don't care if you've like looked through all my LinkedIn posts or know that I'm a Leeds fan. I'm not asked about that. Just tell me like why it's a common connection, where you found me from, and what you want from me, and I will do my best to help.
I think that's great advice. Any final blessings to the
Uh,
people who are watching?
So I would just say that when you're making decisions, like we've already touched on this, but if you do make wrong decisions, go back and analyze why you made that decision, and then look to how you can improve that, and always like have an approach of why am I thinking how I'm thinking, like question why you do things and why you think the way you do, and then you're much more likely to stop making bad decisions or wrong decisions.
I like that one as well. Basically, go back and do a retro on your decision making process.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Tom, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm gonna take away one thing that actually really like brightened my day at the very beginning of the conversation. You mentioned this character-based decision making. That is a concept that I came across a long time ago and completely forgot about. But they just gave me something to look forward to in the next few days, because I'm always like, ooh, this is going to be a nice unlock for me. So guys, if you take something away, take away that or any other awesome, insightful things that Tom has just shared.
The one thing on that as well, actually, there's a TED talk on it. So watch that TED talk. It's I can't remember. It's how to make decisions. It's like really popular, 18 million views or something. Really, really great TED talk. Changed my life, and I guarantee it will change yours.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Great stuff. Thank you very much.